Hey, what's up, guys? It's your boy Daze, and you're about to watch Thorin rant for about 3 hours.
Right, this is going to be another episode of Reflections, and my guest for this one is going to be nitr0, who is obviously technically a retired professional player now, but played for a long time in CSGO. There's also that, like, cup of coffee he had in Valorant that maybe we'll get to at some point in the interview. It's not really a major thing. It's all good, guys. Listen, it was a crazy time. We didn't know if we could travel around the world anymore. No one knew what was going on in CSGO. And also, spoiler, North American CS was sort of dead at the time. But anyway, back to the interview. Here's where I want to start, nitr0. Because what's funny is you're so associated with Team Liquid, and even actually the early Team Liquids before they had some of the names like Naf and Stewie and all the later players that came along, that people might not actually know you had any career before Team Liquid. And one thing that's funny is I actually remember the circumstances I first heard about you. And what's crazy is when I look on Wikipedia, dude, this is listed as like your first ever LAN, because it went like this. If people remember the early days of CSGO, there was two core teams. There was the complexity / Cloud9 guys of like Hiko, Sean Gare, Semphis, Nothing, you know those guys. I purposely didn't include Swag because he swapped over. Then there was the iBUYPOWER guys, which originally was Dazed and Skadoodle and AZK, and then there was others came in and out, like obviously AdreN once upon a time was there, and then they had Swag betrayed everyone and swapped over. This drama sold, people don't even know about it. So yeah, he swapped over, and then obviously Steele came in, who used to himself be an in-game leader. But then what happened was this team was pretty good. Like only a few months earlier, they'd had like second place at that like Face at LAN in Milan, and they were like super hyped. Like we almost beat FNATIC. Like, oh, what the hell? We beat LDLC. Like this was like the first really big like pop off on like an international LAN. And then what happened was they had a spot for the major, because even though they were never making the playoffs in the majors, obviously like it wasn't that hard to qualify back then. Like there just wasn't that many great teams. Almost every good team qualified. And what happened is something mental, like from my memory, you can correct me if I'm wrong, something like, I'm going to say like a month or 2 weeks before the major, the rest of the players mutinied and didn't just like, they just booted Dazed and Steele, the two potential IGLs of the team. And instead they got in nitr0, and then who was the fifth person?
Desi.
Oh, Desi. I always forget. Yeah, obviously the name who sort of disappeared after that. And at the time, you were at least known as like, right, you're like a skilled player, like up and comer. The Desi guy was a bit more of an unknown, but he was sort of vaguely in the same group. Like obviously, like I say, it's listed on Wikipedia as the first ever LAN. Was this really your first actual like proper CSGO LAN? The major?
Yeah, it was my first CSGO LAN ever. But like previously I played 1.6. I played at the ESEA season 13 finals.
Oh, okay.
I was still on 1.6, and like I'll never forget, like Kerrigan had that like giant, he had like a cowbell kind of thing, and every round he was spinning, really, it was so loud. Yeah. I was like, dang, this is crazy. But it was so cool seeing like all the legends of Counter-Strike just playing in that LAN and all that stuff. So it was really cool to see. But I wasn't even planning on playing CSGO at that point. I was just like playing 1.6. I was, pursuing a degree in school and whatnot. So I'll never forget that LAN. That was my first LAN. It was so cool seeing all the faces and putting like, personalities to the faces and stuff like that. But I was like a nobody. No one really knew who I was at that point. And I don't know, it was a really fun time for me.
So, okay, then let's come to this. Give me the story first, how you got in the team. Like, was it really like you just get a message like old school style, like you want to join the team for the major? I'm guessing, I think it was Swag who knew you, right?
Yeah. Oh, actually, no, I take that back. My first LAN was SoCal. And I forgot what
small one.
It was 2014, yeah. Where we played against like Mo's team and stuff, and Frost and all those guys. So, and yeah, that was a really fun time. But actually, yeah, I don't even know if Brax was at the event. I'm not sure. But yeah, I played that LAN. I was on Area 51 at the time, still in college and whatnot, doing a part-time job, trying to practice on my team at night while I have like an 8 a.m. class. So it was a super hectic time in my life. But I was still playing the game that I love a lot, and it was so much fun and just grinding it every night. But yeah, it was. I remember, I'll never forget. He just messaged me on Steam, and he's like, "Yo, you want to like, are you free for this date? Like, do you want to come play the major with us?" He's like, "We need some heat." I'll never forget that when he said that word. I was like, "Yeah, I'm like so down." But then I was like, I was still in college, so I checked my calendar, and I actually had like a final like that week.
Right.
And I was like, oh no, like this is the worst case scenario. I had to tell like my girlfriend, my wife now, but like I had to talk to her. I was like, look, like this is like a once in a lifetime opportunity. I play this game literally every single day. I've been playing since I was like 4 years old, literally Counter-Strike. So she's like, I don't know, like maybe just talk to your professor, see like if they can let you take it early. And then I remember like 3 out of 4 let me take it early, and then one of my calculus classes, they're like, no, we can't do that. I'm sorry. I'll never forget. I actually like failed that class. I'm pretty sure, or I got like a D or something.
Okay.
So I was like, oh no. But anyways, yeah, it was so worth it.
The only thing though is there's a bad story attached to this major, because in the group that you're in, dude, this is the group where like second place is wide open. In fact, some would argue your team was the one that should be there. Now, to be fair, there was like the Copenhagen Wolves team with Glaive. Interesting detail. nitr0 did actually beat Glaive in the first map he played him on LAN. So forget about all the rest of it. We'll get to the rest of it. Started off with the W, started with a 1-0.
Yeah.
The problem is, you know the story. On the final match, you were playing against Penta, which was those German players, and you play Inferno. And listen to this, guys. This is when Inferno's really CT-sided. You had a 13-2 CT half. Problem solved, right? But then they just like 14-0'd you, didn't they? Like this must have been like such an insane bomber way to lose a major and go out and blow getting out of the group, right?
Honestly, after the Columbus choke, I don't even think about the Penta game anymore. You just brought it back up, and I'm like, oh no, I remember now. It was so bad. It was so bad. I remember Brax almost clutched like a 1v4 too. It was like one of our only rounds we were about to get on T side. I'm just like, oh, that was such a bad experience, man.
Do you remember? Because obviously the problem with this is because people didn't know, like spoiler, I didn't know internally what happened, but if you know Dazed and Steel, let's just say they're not always the easiest people to get along with, and they have big egos and they have their own ideas. So it's not like a shocker to me that people might want to kick them, but like, cause it's like last minute, because of that result at the Face It one, and then the fact that last minute you've been brought in, because of this result, I remember the time like the community was sort of hating on you guys and just being like, bring back Dazed and Steel or something, right? What did you think of the reception?
At the time, I mean, I really wasn't like big into like I had like no social media or anything. I had like back then I had like MySpace and whatnot, you know, just to see like friends and whatnot. So it was pretty new at the time. And then once I joined Liquid, they're like, oh, like you got to make a Facebook fan page, you got to do Twitter, you got to do like an Instagram, all this stuff. So I was like, all right. Because I feel like social media just like messes so much with like your personal life, takes up so much time, and you know how the deal is. But yeah, at that time, I actually had just made my first Twitter, and then like I experienced like a lot of people like shit talking me and stuff, and I'm just like, what is going on? Like these guys don't even know who I am. You know, for me, it's like really new because at the time, like I said, I didn't have any social media, so I didn't really have any of those interactions before. But I just like it just kind of fueled me, and I felt like it gave me like a fire to prove that I had what it takes. Because at the time, you know, I felt like I was really good at the game. I was putting so many hours on just like aim mapping and stuff, working so much on my mechanics. But yeah, I think the Days and Steel thing, like the more I think about it, I feel like it was just a personality clash within the team, and they just didn't really like get along because they got like 3 really chill people, and then they got 2 really outspoken people who probably like did a lot of the criticism, and it just kind of reflected back on them, like, oh, this guy's an asshole kind of thing, you know. But yeah, I don't know. It would have been interesting to see. They probably would have made it out of that group, honestly, because they had a lot more chemistry together. And the group wasn't that hard, like looking back.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. Also, this leads into another story, which just shows how it's like in your career, it's all about like you have to zig at the moment, not when you're supposed to zag. Like you have to get the timing down. Because after this, you also played with them at like the ESL LAN where they came third. And I remember this was one where you were like popping off and you were doing really well. And so what happened? This is a story I remember. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Was because old Hiko, my mate, was one of the best of all time, by the way, behind the scenes at like manipulating the thing. He was always playing the fucking chess game. Like I used to joke with him when he got bad, like it's because half your attention was like getting your contract and all that, figuring out you're making more than the rest of that. And what happened was he approached Dazed, who was like potentially going to like come back into the team, and he told him something like, I've heard you making like a super team. And if you remember, they were going to make like the super team, which was basically iBUYPOWER plus fucking Hiko. And it was going to be you originally, because you popped off at this LAN. And so as far as I know, you had this mega performance at this LAN against like international teams in NA, showing like you're a skilled player. And then it was sort of like you got bumped from the super team, although obviously, spoiler, if people don't know, the super team only played the qualifier for the MLG Aspen. And then obviously a few months later, most of them got banned from CS forever. So I mean, it didn't end up working out anyway. It didn't matter, but that must have been a bummer in that sense. Like you pop off at the LAN, you think, right, I've earned my spot, right? And essentially, as far as I know, before the whole Skadoodle and Hiko thing, like you were going to be in the super team. Like it was good. That was going to be the case, right? Did you think like my chances being fucked up that they didn't let you in?
Yeah, I was really bummed there. Like, I remember Brax. I think they were leaving it upon Brax to kind of make the decision whether. No, actually, it was like a team decision, but Brax wanted to play with me, and I think the rest of them wanted to play with Hiko.
Right.
So I remember it was kind of like a democracy kind of thing, and I was like, no, this is so sad because I remember at that LAN I was playing really confident. I felt so good, like everything was just feeling really good for me in that at that tournament. It was probably one of the best tournaments I've ever had, individually. I think.
Yeah.
Especially considering the circumstances of me not really having much LAN experience in CSGO and stuff, and I'm playing against like the Kenny S and all these really insane players. So yeah, that was an amazing feeling. And I remember once they made that decision, actually, since I did so good at that LAN, I think Daps reached out to me, which was the denial lineup,
Oh, okay,
and they're like, yeah, which eventually became Liquid. So maybe it was kind of a blessing, you know?
Right.
Yeah. So I eventually got to play with that team, and we became Liquid, and then the story goes on. But I really enjoyed playing with Skadoodle, AZK, Desi, and Brax. It was a lot of fun, and I was super young at the time, obviously. So I was learning a lot every single time I played, and they were like the legends of NA. So yeah, it was cool.
Pete, random detail. And what's funny is there's so many things have happened in CSGO. There's one actually rare things I forgot, which was because you popped off at that LAN and I knew you got sort of like fucking staked on joining the team just because like you say, it was politics. Like at the time, if people don't know, I think Hiko had already been like top 20 player on HLTV and stuff. Like no one's going to say no to that, unfortunately. And they're all going to think like we're going to win the major or something ridiculous, right? So when they made this lineup, I actually famously did. Look, this is actually something mad. Like if you went back, it's going to probably be like my fourth Thorin thoughts ever or something. Like that series was brand new back then because I'd only just started to go independent. I did one about you and it was called like nitr0, don't give up or whatever. And even though now it looks mad cheesy because it looks like in a movie like I knew what was going to happen. I didn't. I was just basically sort of trying to say, because if people don't know back then, like I said, there was only the top two teams. If you were on those two teams, basically all you can do is play ESL LAN, and essentially you don't really think of it like a career, right? A lot of people, I think it was even implied that because you had school you might quit, right? You might even retire or something. So the point of the video to me was like, if you pop off like that and you're actually good, like just stick with it. Like there might be more chances down the line. I mean, I didn't know it at the time, but actually in a few months, as you can see with Liquid and CLG, it turned out a load of the LCS orgs were going to come in. There was more spaces. Did you actually think about quitting at this time?
I'm trying to remember. I remember like obviously because I kind of flunked school at that time and that semester, it was like, well, I'm not making any money because I never really had a contract with iBUYPOWER or anything. And I think my first contract was with Denial, but it was like really low. It was like $500 a month or something. And I'm like, I was working part-time at a Chinese restaurant, just like as a waiter, just making like barely enough income to pay for my groceries every week. So that $500 when I got it I was like, dang, like this is really good. And then I think once we went to Liquid, I think I was around like 1,000. And then that was like the really big stepping stone. I was like, all right, maybe I can make some money from this. Because previously the only time I made money was like through that ESL LAN season 13. I made like maybe $1,000 or something. Sure. I remember showing my mom and she's like, oh my God, look, you made money. Yeah. It was really exciting. But yeah, obviously like I was enjoying my time a lot and I saw that I had a lot of like just self-confidence going into it. I knew that I could compete because obviously I just did like really good at an international LAN. So I don't think I want to, like obviously I didn't want to quit, but it was more like, do I have to pursue this degree? Because no one knew at the time that it was going to become what it is today, right?
No way.
Or you could just predict it kind of, but yeah, obviously I didn't want to quit, but I don't remember exactly what the thought was at the time.
Right, obviously we should introduce this key detail though. Again, to a modern fan, they're going to be like, what? But like, nitr0 wasn't even vaguely the IGL. Like, you weren't even in any context of the IGL. And at the time, you were like an aggressive rifler. Like, you were a guy with a lot of aim, right? How would you describe your game back then? Like, what sort of a role were you sort of playing? And how did you think of yourself?
I was just a stone cold fragger. I was on Mouse Excel. I was embracing the entry role. So any set strat, I'd be like, yeah, let me go first kind of thing. And I had like really good experienced teammates, so they knew how to support me really well. Like AZK was really good support, Braxler was good support. Obviously he's kind of baity, but he knew exactly what to throw for me. So I was kind of just like I was like, let me go. Like I don't know. I feel like back then entry fragging was way different than it is now. Because back then I feel like it was mainly set strats and like you had like set roles within the team. So I I was just like a young gun, pretty much. That's the only way I can really describe it.
By the way, I use someone. Look, obviously, I'm sure over time it changes, but I used to. Would you consider yourself someone with really good aim?
Like right now, or just
no, like back then at your peak? Like, what was it? Were you a guy with like the mega first bullet, like really fucking crisp aim?
First bullet, I would say I had pretty good aim. Like, not necessarily like your Nico kind of aimer, but I had really good. I feel like I had a really good spray. Like I spray a lot, and I still spray. Like just a lot. Like even in Valorant, like I'm playing Valorant, I find myself spraying way too much. I'm just like, damn, this game sucks for spraying. But yeah, yeah. I mean, I feel like pretty good first bullet accuracy, but I feel like my biggest attribute to my aim is probably my spray.
Okay, and one thing I want to ask just before we get into it is, back then, look, I mean, it was way less professional and all that jazz back then. Were you ever someone who, like, did you actually ever care to watch POVs of other players or watch, like, matches? Were you ever trying to be cerebral as a player back then?
No, definitely wasn't me. I was
focusing
mainly on my own game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I think without naming names, I remember asking some people who were winning like majors in 2015, like, you guys do like, study the opponent and see what their spots are. And they're like, nah, not really. We let like the coach do that. And I was like, what? Like, but whatever. People have to realize, like you said, it was way smaller back then. Like, no one
it's
sort of
way
cared.
Different now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They just thought, I'm sick. Why would I need to?
Yeah. There was like no replay system or anything like that. There's just download divide and like you freaking go through a demo. It'd take like an hour to go through one map because if you wanted to go rewatch a round, it would have to reset all the ticks. And it would be frozen for like a minute trying to go back to like a specific round that you want if you're deep in the demo. It was crazy. But yeah, I was never that kind of person really like back then. We would like watch the games back as a team and just, figure out mistakes and whatnot. But it was never like, I was never really part of the watching the opponents and giving ideas.
Right. So one of the first lands you went to when you joined Team Liquid was that one, the MLG X Games Aspen, which if people don't know was really cool land. It actually, unironically, it was actually at the Winter X Games, like they're literally outside the tent where we were all like doing this show. You could just see people doing like backflips and snowboards and shit. It was mental, wasn't it?
Oh man, that was such a amazing story. Like, it's just like I go from being like a college student to just like being this like treated like literally an X Games athlete. And I'm just like, what the hell just happened the past couple of months? Like I met like the little dude from Jackass. He was there.
Oh, okay.
There was like Wiz Khalifa had a concert there, and I just like walked up to it and was like, damn. But yeah, it's actually a funny story because iBUYPOWER was supposed to go, and like I don't know how somehow they had like the most badass like condo or whatever. It was like a 3-story condo with like a hot tub on the balcony and all that with like a mountainside view. And I remember once they got dropped, Liquid like got that one because we took their spot. Because actually we weren't supposed to go there. We actually took their spot from them being dropped with all the throwing stuff.
Right.
So I was like, damn, this is like the coolest thing ever. Like it's like 4 feet of snow outside of our like condo, and then there's like 3 stories. Like everyone has like their own king bed. It was amazing. That event was so cool. And I have like the little card still, the little lanyard, like player card thing. It says X Games on it. That's awesome.
Right. The thing is, though, I do have a question, even though it's a fucked up question, but it's a funny one. So at the time, the 2 best teams was obviously FNATIC, who later won majors, and LDLC, who won the previous major, right? And these 2 teams absolutely ploughed Team Liquid. Like, they just body bagged you. So the question is, in their prime, because this is, if people don't know, probably when the gap was like the biggest between NA and like Europe, what were these teams like at their prime? Were they unbeatable?
Well, actually, if you remember, like to that ESA land, like we actually came close to beating them with that iBUYPOWER lineup. I remember I was playing so good against them too. I was so confident. We like winning like really good like 1v2s and stuff. So I knew they were beatable, but obviously like they're the best team, and I was with a completely different roster that had way less experience on land. So I don't remember going to that match being like, yeah, we got this. Like this is gonna be an easy game. It's like no, it's FNATIC. Like they're the best team in the world. LDLC. Probably second best team at the time. They got like Kenny S, I think, at that time, right?
No, this is when they had the Shocks lineup. But yeah, they were still mega low. Still had the killers. Yeah, happy.
Yes, yeah, they were. I don't know. We just coming on that Liquid roster. Like we didn't really have any experience versus Europeans at all. So like I don't know if this was like one of their first. Well, I guess they played that ESA land against Europeans, but they also got demolished, right? So. Yeah, I don't remember how I was feeling going into that, but it was like a really cool atmosphere at that event, and I knew that it was going to be a good experience. I remember we played CLG, which was like one of the probably top 3 NA teams at the time. We played them in Atlanta, beat them, so that was a good feeling for like the domestic matchup at least.
Right, I remember the weird thing about 2015 was this was the year where like the roster just gradually got like people cycled out, and the problem Liquid had at the time was even though in NA and online you're a really good team, it's like when you went to the LANs, it nearly never worked. That you usually come in like last place or bombing the groups or something. Like back then, this is what's ridiculous because obviously everyone thinks it's a later storyline when you're like almost winning major. Even back then, people sort of said Liquid choked or they have some sort of issue on LAN or something. Do you think that group of players was there some like was it an experience problem? What was the issue? Do you think? Because as far as I can tell, you clearly were better. Like I'm sure in scrims you were better or in the boot camps and stuff.
I think it was like a confidence issue, to be honest, and just lack of European practice. Now that I think about it, because nowadays, like when you play these teams in scrims, you can remember their tendencies of, especially when you're like an IGL, secondary IGL, you remember all these things, and it's super important for you to remember all these things, how they play, how are they playing clutches, like how does each player like to play specific scenarios. You can just remember, like it just comes back to you in that moment, you know. But like when you're in a 1v1 versus like Crims, you're just like, you're scared, like you in your brain you have every expectation or every possible scenario in your brain, so you don't know what to expect, and it's just overwhelming, and you start getting nervous and all this stuff. So I think it was a bunch of things just adding up in terms of that, because like previously the only time I actually got European practice was with iBUYPOWER at the Inferno online before DreamHack Winter 2014,
right?
And we were destroying teams at that tournament, which was actually crazy to think about. Like we were playing like VP, we were playing like all the really good teams, FNATIC. We were beating them all in scrims. Actually, I was such a little nerd. I took like screenshots of it and stuff. Because I was just such a happy little kid. I still have them actually. It's pretty funny to look at. But yeah, I think it was just like a lack of experience kind of thing and lack of chemistry for us as a team, and just I think those are the 2 biggest attributes.
Right. Obviously, in this team, if people don't know, it was a bit weird first because there was actually AdreN and Daps at the same time, but then Daps basically got like kicked out, and then it was just AdreN took over again. And if people don't know, AdreN from CS Source is actually like a legendary in-game leader, and someone's like a very veteran player already, and you've even played with him before. What was AdreN like as an in-game leader? Because obviously people know he later interacts with you as a coach. So what was it like to play under AdreN in this time?
He was really good, like especially back then, because he provided a lot of structure that, like, for example, John and I, or EliGE and I, didn't really have, because we were just used to like ESA pugs, kind of just throwing like a team together for scrims, you know, this kind of thing. So I think he provided a lot of structure, and he definitely taught us a lot about just how Counter-Strike should be played in a, you know, in like a international form, because he has like that experience in Source, and like the maps are the same pretty much from Source because it's a Source engine. So me and John are 1.6 players. So it's just a little bit different, but the mechanics are pretty much the same, and the maps, not the same mechanics, but like the maps look the same, and it probably plays out pretty similar to how it did in Source. So he definitely provided a lot of that valuable experience that John and I took in, and yeah, I think he was great. I think his biggest thing was he would get really frustrated with us if we made a mistake. It would just be like kind of blown out of proportion sometimes. Whereas like if he, like whenever he's coaching us 2019 and stuff, like he was super chill, laid back, as you can see like in the cam and all that. But back then he was way more strict than he seems to be today.
Right. Obviously, this was the era when like. It's funny because since EliGE was in your team as well, he was even less known than you. So like at this point, like people now we know you from a few of the lands. You're considered like one of the rising stars. EliGE was sort of the young gun in the team that people didn't really know that well. Who was this EliGE? Who was the EliGE you first met? Because as far as I know, like you were sort of like the entry duo, right?
Well, I actually knew John like for probably 5 years before that.
Oh, okay.
Before he joined my team, because I didn't know him, but I knew of him like from ESA pugs. His first alias was actually Eurothius, and I remember playing against this kid. And I was like, damn, this kid's pretty good like back then. But you know, when I was ESA pugging, I had like a huge ego and all that, just like most people do.
Okay.
And I was like, I kind of saw him as like competition within like the ESA pugs. So yeah, it's really cool to like see that he became like my teammate eventually. And I remember the conversation. He's like, I think I looked at his ESA page and I saw like his one of his last names was Eurothius, and I'm like, wait a second, I used to play with this kid back then, and he's like 3 years younger than me, or 2 years, 2.5 years or something. Or like, wait, I think he's 3 years younger than, or 2 years younger than me. So like back then he wasn't really young. He was a really young kid, looking back. So it's really cool to see that. But he was just like this crazy fragger that had just the fastest sensitivity ever. And I remember he would just buy like Negevs, and he would just have like insane like control with it, and like insane tracking. So I knew that he had a lot of talent, but it was mainly just is he kind of like that kid that we need for the team. And I remember at the time he was on Elevate, and he was playing with like Rush and XP3 and Storm and all those guys. So, and he was showing that he had a lot of talent. So I remember I messaged him and I was like, "Yo, do you want to join?" And that's pretty much how it started.
Right. Obviously, I need to ask about the aforementioned Hiko, because the funny thing is, even though he sort of like half snaked you and got into the super team, that ended up not mattering anyway. As we said, that Aldous was moot anyway, and he even got the Aspen spot. And then the joke is, if people don't know, at the start he wasn't in Team Liquid. At the start there was that whole thing where like he even played that, him and Scrimming played that LAN with Elevate, and they were basically just doing like a power move, because they were like, we're going to stick together, we have to go to the same team. They were just like, everyone was basically auditioning. Like I think CLG wanted them to join, like all the teams wanted them to join at the time. And then basically Skadoodle, if people don't know the story, got offered what at the time was mental, which is like a 10k signing bonus. So he was just like, actually that Hiko, you know that whole like package thing, I'm just going to go to Cloud9. So he bounced, and then obviously Hiko came to this team. Right at the time, Hiko's a really established player. Like I say, he's already been in the HLTV top X. He's been in like deep in majors and stuff. What was it like when he initially came onto the team? Like, was he someone where, like, was he egotistical? Did he want his spots? Did he want his style of play? Did he get along with him early?
Yeah, he's definitely, you get along with Spencer for sure. I remember when he joined, he kind of brought this like calm mentality that we needed to have because he's older than us, and him and AdreN were kind of like the fatherly figures, and they had like the most experience together. But yeah, I mean, it's obvious what roles he's gonna play. He's played the same pretty much his whole career. He's kind of like the trader, the third guy in kind of person. So it was pretty easy to fit him into our team because we had John and I, which were the aggressive players, and we had, you know, the balance between AdreN and Hiko where they were more passive. So it was pretty easy to fit him in, to be honest. And then Fugly was kind of like a clutcher, along with Hiko, but he had his moments where he would be aggressive and all that. And actually Fugly was probably like our best player for a little bit of time, if you remember. He is so good. He was just super good mechanically, and he was very smart for his time. And I think he's like a year or so older than me. So it's not like he was that much older than me or John, like compared to like Spencer and Eric. So yeah, it was a pretty good dynamic we had.
Right. One of the first big LANs where there was a result was when you had the IEM San Jose event on home soil, which has a weird story to it. Because if you look on Wikipedia, you're going to go like, oh my God, they beat Virtus Pro. They did, but it has the weirdest details ever. Because as far as I remember, Virtus Pro didn't have, I think, snacks or something. I think some like really good player hadn't come. And then on your team, this is not a joke, Mo actually was standing in, because initially you needed like a fifth player or something weird, right? So this match already sounds like, can you give me some story on this?
Yeah, the Oakland tournament was awesome. I think that was one of our biggest like crowds that we played in front of. I remember I had the backwards hat on and all that before they removed that stuff. And I remember like one of our CEOs was there, Steve Arhansen. So there was a lot of pressure there. I remember that was like one of our first biggest victories that we had as a team, and it was such a good feeling. I remember Steve was like, if you win I forgot what he said. He's like, if you win this, you get something, like just like putting more pressure on us.
Little bonus.
Yeah, I remember that. But other than that, like honestly, I don't really remember that tournament as much.
What's sad is I do remember there's one bad thing, which is in the semis he played Navi, and that was the one where Edward did that insane dust too, like 1v4 or whatever, through that smoke that was like impossible. But like, to be fair, it is a fucking sick clip. It's just obviously you don't want to be on the other side of that. You don't want to be the name in the right hand corner, do you?
Yeah, I remember. I'm trying to remember. Like we talked about this clutch so much because like I forgot exactly what happened, but it was like
I think he like went Eric through the smoke behind you or something weird, right?
Yeah. He like Cab Bricks was smoked, and then he walked through the smoke as we went through it together. Yes. We're like, all right, let's go through 1, 2, 3, and we all 1, 2, 3'd it, and then he just basically walked through and killed us in the back. But it's like looking at it, we should just wait it out. There's no rush in it, you know. He just planted the bomb and all that, and then I think he spammed the last guy defusing with a smoke, through a smoke. So That was awful. That was awful too.
And then the thing is, later in the year, there was an ESEA, but this is when ESEA already became part of ESL Pro League. So even though it was on Edit, so it was already a big LAN. And this is the one where, if I'm correct, wasn't this the one where you had like the cash game against FNATIC and you just went fucking ham and had like a 40 bomb or something ridiculous?
Yeah, it was.
I think people don't know, that was like the big one where everyone was like, right, Nitro's here now, he's ready to play.
Yeah, we had, I think that was the term we had most Santa No, because EliGE had like an exam or something he had to take.
Let me double
I don't
check.
remember exactly.
Apparently not, but don't worry about it.
I don't know.
I think it was the other way around, but yeah. Do you remember having this game against FNATIC though, popping off? This is when they were still the best team.
Yeah, people always talk about this game for some reason. There's like the nitr0 versus FNATIC, like even like fans come up to me and they're like, "Oh, man, I've been watching you ever since the FNATIC game and all this stuff." I'm like, that's really cool. Yeah, I was just feeling it that game. I don't know. That was a really good game for me. And at the time, obviously they were the best team. They had the best player in the world. It was just one of those games where you just understand like everything that's going on, and you are just mechanically playing really well, and it really shows.
Right. After this, the next year, by the time you get to the LANs, you have the now infamous, well, now legendary, s1mple. s1mple actually joined your team. Even though people know that detail, dude, they don't know how crazy that is. Because even though, I guess later, especially in NA, like it actually became a thing you could have imports. Your team had your Kindar recently, like Cirque was in NRG. Like eventually it didn't become that weird. But at the time, I always said, this is actually why, because me and Hiko were two of the people like brainstorming, like who could you get? And I remember some of the names before, we were telling them like maybe that Oscar guy from Czech Republic, you know, we were going through them all. What we realized is, because at the time, there wasn't insane money in CS, no good European player would come. Because it's not like League of Legends. Like you get to live at home if you're in Europe. So they all just wanted to stay there, I'm afraid. No one wanted to come and like live most of the year in NA. So basically you'd have to get someone like Oscar was a bit older and he wasn't in top team. So you could maybe have him. And then the angle on s1mple was this. Like, look, everyone had heard in the scene like he's mad toxic and he's really rude or whatever. He'd basically been already kicked out of the team. He's by far the best in that flip side team. So like it kind of said it all. But that's what I said to Hiko. Like, that's the thing though. Logically, that's the only reason you'll be able to get him though, because he hasn't got a team. Like essentially he has to join. And basically he did. And he came over. And people might remember almost immediately when he arrived, he had that like drama in fucking ESEA with all the Brazilians and stuff. And it's like, if people don't know, this was like prime s1mple. This wasn't like later he sort of toned it down. And I'm sure when he got teammates, he liked it, got better. But I've heard this was the era where people are going to know that the results at the majors are awesome. You know, and this, at the Columbus one, he could have won. But I've heard behind the scenes, I don't know what I mean to say I've heard. Put it this way, I knew your coach back then. And spoiler, I've even heard some of the like recordings of these scrims. Dude, this guy was fucking wilding. Like, I'm not joking. Like, this is like, he wasn't doing it as a joke as well. Like, if he didn't like how things were going, he would rage, right? And he would just get upset directly at people. Right? I mean, I know it's like a culture clash because your team was pretty chill, but what was this like? Because on the one hand, like, he's fucking obviously he's like cracked at the game, but I've heard it sounded like he was a really hard teammate if you were used to having like a chilled out vibe in a team.
Yeah, Sasha was definitely he was so far ahead of everyone else mechanically, and just it's so funny because like even today, if we go back and like we watch the scrims for fun just to see like the tilting and all that, you know, with my current or ex Liquid teammates, and it's like Sasha was so far ahead actually macro wise, and he didn't even know it, and mechanically. So like he was also micro and macro so much further ahead than like you would even think back then. Like he had like really good reads, and he understood just where the enemies were at like any point in the round. It's actually wild to think about because obviously like back then like he was already becoming the best player in the world, but just slowly, or maybe he was at the time and no one actually knew it until he like got the opportunity to actually show, you know, like at the Columbus final or Columbus major and the Cologne major, for example. But I remember we knew that obviously everyone knew that he was super talented, and getting him was going to be a huge risk because of his reputation. You know, he's already gotten fined a couple times here and there, said some dumb stuff on stream, and I remember like obviously Hiko had a good relationship with him previously, so that was a huge thing for him and us. So having Hiko on the team kind of balanced it a little bit, but I think him and Eric kind of got into it a little bit because, like I mentioned earlier, like Eric was kind of like the structure kind of person. He would get frustrated.
I heard he wasn't a fan of AdreN.
Not at all. Yeah. So like they definitely had their arguments back and forth, and it was just some practices were just awful to play. They were miserable because we had two people who were just getting mad at each other, and was like super counterproductive, and you know, me
I
and
think it was
John,
even
like,
implied, dude, before even the major, like you might just get kicked out. Like maybe we have to just boot this guy out.
yeah, it was really bad, to be honest, and like no one really knows that, as like the fans know, so they just kind of see from the outside. But it was really hard to play. But then again, like s1mple is like just dropping 30s every scrim, so it's like, what do we do?
Yes. Right. Obviously, then the weird thing was you went to that first qualifier, and people forget this. They maybe remember that thing of s1mple crying at the end, but they don't know why he cried. He cried because you guys had like fucked this qualifier up, and then you were playing actually that Oscar Hellraiser's team, and they were going fucking ham on like the third map, and you guys qualified by literally like the smallest margin ever. And actually, s1mple didn't play great in this game. This wasn't one of his better games, and so if people don't know, the reason he cried is because essentially, like you're saying, if people don't know, I get why he was almost like a spoiled kid in the game. He actually could just like do anything he wanted. And so because this was like the one game ever where basically he got carried by his team and they got him to the major. And if people don't know, he'd been even banned from like some of the majors, the ESL ones. So he'd like only played, I think, Dreamhack Winter. So in this scenario, like it was actually kind of like he saw like a bit of growth from us. Do you remember this insane qualification last second where it looked like you were going to blow it and then you just got through?
Yeah, it was super intense. I remember him crying too on the interview, and he was such a young kid. And it's like, he's like, it's the first time I got carried. So it was almost like a sense of like humbleness, like humbling himself, that he's like, all right, these guys like actually are here for me, and I'm not just there for them. That kind of makes sense. Because obviously, like previously, he just was playing super well with us, and he had a lot of freedom within our system and within our team to just do whatever he wanted, kind of. We would just kind of play around it. So whenever he wasn't having that insane game, which he usually, like, you know, back then, like he wouldn't really have those off games. He would be pretty consistently top fragging, or like at least a little bit towards the top. I remember he was playing like pretty bad. I don't know if it was like a pressure thing or something, because he maybe saw Oscar as like a rival, or just the CIS team as a rival. So yeah, I remember it was a really cool moment. It was super sweet looking back, and it was cool to kind of see him like being humbled a little bit back then.
When you guys went to the major, right, this was one where, like, it's not like it's impossible to get through. This is the one where, like, they had the FaZe clan, but this is before they had Carrigan, where it was just, like, a bunch of good players, but they don't have an IGL. You got Splice, who was actually, like, a team where it's like, how did they even qualify? But whatever, they did. And then, obviously, you had FNATIC, who was the best team in the world. They won, like, 6 events in a row. They're mega. But, like, second place is right there. Here's the ridiculous thing that people will forget, though. You guys won the group, because in the winners game, you played FNATIC on Dust 2, and you won an overtime game. Like, that alone must already, because in the coming in, because how you qualified, no one thought this team was going to go far at the major. Like, you know, maybe get to the top 8. That's like, that would be cool. Like, it must have been a big deal to win this match. I mean, they really were the best team in the world. Remember, they hadn't lost a LAN with that lineup. That was when they brought Dennis in and won the 6 LANs in a row. Everyone thought they were going to win this major, actually.
Yeah, beating them with Dusty was huge. And we beat them again on Dusty, right? The actual major, right?
That was at the major I'm talking about, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that was a really good, like, just beating them in general is just such a big confidence boost going in. Even if it's the best of one, doesn't even matter. It's like you still got to beat the team ahead of you. And I think that was a game where AdreN popped off, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, AdreN was having a game. I remember he was opping everyone. So everyone was kind of filling in their respective role. And I just remember after the tournament, or after that match, it was like, damn, like we can actually go far, like in this tournament, especially after beating that team. Like we were feeling super confident going into whoever we played next.
Right. The interesting thing, you referenced it there, is this is a detail people don't know about s1mple. Dude, even I forget it sometimes. I think I did a video the other day where I was talking about like Fallen and AWPers, and I compared like s1mple stats. And I'm like, look how much better stats are. But actually, this is how goated s1mple is. Those are mainly like from the rifle. Apparently on the rifle, he was like 0.8 fucking KPI. Like, what? And so people don't know. AdreN was the one AWPing the team, except here's the thing. This is also where you have to know that s1mple did think he was the best. The difference is people remember the next match against CLG has all those AWP highlights like on fucking Cash and Nuke and stuff. Or whatever. I think it was Cash. There was one. Yeah, it was Cash and Mirage with the 2. But that's the thing about s1mple. He would just essentially just pick up an AWP if he wanted to, right? Yeah. He would just be like, right, I'm just taking it this round. I'm going to pop off.
Yeah, if he had like 4750, he was buying it up, and he's just trying to win the round for us. And like, I remember even when we'd lose pistol, and if someone got like a 4K on pistol, he would be like, yo, can you drop me the M4? And I'm like, yes, take it.
That's so
and he would always get like 4 kills somehow. I'm just like, how are you doing this? Like, it's just crazy that he can maneuver his way to a certain position where he can get multi-kills, even if he's down, like even if he had no armor, he'd still find a way to get like multi-kills. It's actually crazy to think about nowadays, where like everyone is kind of skilled. Everyone's like more skilled than they were at least back then. But like it's just I don't know. It's crazy that the game has been out for that long, and like he was still that much further ahead, and he was young at the time as well. He was young.
Right, obviously the next match is the one, like you say, the one that everyone goes, this is the liquid choke, it all began here. But I even, look, here's the thing. By definition, like I think a lot of the choke ones later on is like fans just said that every time you lost a close game or every time you had a lead, right? Sometimes it's not a choke. Sometimes the team plays better, etc. This obviously was because of the scores. Like on both maps, you had like the big lead at the point where you can't lose the map and it has to go to OT. Like, I can't remember which way around it was. One was 15-9, one was like 15-6. And so in this, and obviously the first one on Mirage was when Cold Zero did that actually bullshit like jumping no scope. Otherwise, the map's over. Right? This is one of those ones where like that really does have to be defined as a choke, right? And also, even though it's a 2-0, it's not the closest 2-0 you're ever going to see.
Oh yeah, we definitely choked that for sure. And even the round where Cold had the jumping up, it was like we actually had the correct call macro wise. Like we were 4 versus 1. They weren't even like near rotating positions for him. So the fact that he did that is just like mind blowing. And I even watched a clip back. Like we did like a content piece for Liquid like a month ago or 2 months ago. All like the biggest major moments. And I'm just like, why is he even going for that? Like it's actually crazy that he actually went for that play.
If people don't know, this was where, because they were like down, and I think they were even like semi-broke, they supposedly in their team, someone, I think Fallen just said, just do whatever, basically, because they thought the game was over, dude. Like they didn't think they were going to win this. Yeah. And supposedly he bought like a glass cannon up, jumped and did all that. And I think there's even a thing where, because they had to keep playing, he just tells them all like, you're not even going to believe what I just did, but they couldn't even know. They had to just keep playing the game. Like, no, that is, listen, bear in mind, if people don't know, don't hate on me, because spoiler, s1mple does one later. You can't aim those. If you ever go into the developer mode and put that box on, it's fucking enormous, isn't it? Like, that was essentially, look, it was cool, but it was kind of a fluke.
I mean, that's definitely a fluke. Like, you can't say that that's like a thing, like, that people are going to do. Like, people do it now because there's a giant graffiti on the wall next to it.
Yes, exactly.
Back then, I remember even s1mple was like, he's like, guys, I understand how to hit people with jumping no scopes. We're like, what? And he basically said, like, you want to take your shot at the peak of your jump, and it'll be the most accurate. I was like, all right. Like, I don't know if I believe that, but like, maybe it's true.
Okay.
I don't know. But yeah, anyways, like the fact that he went for that, and I remember after we're just like, what just happened? Like you can see in the cameras that we're just like, what? Like did that actually just happen to us? And then like I don't know, I don't even remember. That's literally the only round I remember from that whole entire series, honestly. And then like the next map was Cash, and I remember Taco just buying an auto sniper and killing all of us. Like those are the 2 moments that I remember from that series, besides like the big choke.
The other thing I think so sad as well is, to me, like another thing about choking, because obviously we'll get to this later with other opponents, is some of it clearly, it isn't just like you make the bad decision. A lot of it's like self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it? It's like once you know you're going to choke, then like you start thinking about it when it gets to that round, and then the opponent knows, and they're like, oh, they might choke. It's like it's both at the same time. And the problem this is, like, the reason this is so brutal is because if people remember that this Luminosity team won this major and the next one, their strength basically was to make people choke, because it was just amazing. Like late round, they were super clutch. Like they did have the best player in the world. Like in some ways, like it is forgivable to lose the game. It's just the problem is you could have won that, and if you'd won that, you could have won the major for real. Like you could for real have won the major of that team, right?
Oh yeah, I think so. Like we were playing super well that tournament. And it's like if you're feeling it in a certain tournament, it's like when we were winning all tournaments in 2019, it was like you truly believe that you're the best team. Like you show it in the server, and you can just feel the confidence in your team. It's like you don't even have to prep that much, because you just feel like you're just in that zone. And I felt that with that team, and like especially after like being in like FNATIC on like just everything was kind of adding up to playing really well. And it's like, what if like we didn't choke that? What if there's a lot of what ifs in my career? Like what if Astralis didn't exist? Like what if we didn't choke that major? You know what I'm saying? Like I could have won like 3 majors probably if the what if wasn't there. But unfortunately it's not how it went, so it's pretty sad to look at.
By the way, one thing I'd always wondered, because no one ever asks this, is obviously Luminosity team lived in LA and they were actually in the NA ecosystem. When you would actually practice this team, could you actually tell that they were actually the best team?
Eventually, yes, because they kind of had a different style from all the North American teams. North American teams are kind of just like, you know, go into a set strat or like very basic default, and then like go and rotate into a set strat. Whereas like Luminosity they were doing a lot of fakes back then. I remember, and they're kind of that team where it's like, are they faking this or are they actually going? It's like they put that sense of doubt in your mind in the mid round, where it's like these NA teams, you just know pretty much what they're doing all the time, because they also don't have confidence in themselves to do fakes and trust that the two other players are going to win that clutch against like the Liquids or whatever, or Luminosities. So I remember like when they came to NA, they didn't even have Cold at the time. Am I correct on that? Like Cold joined later.
I would guess they moved and then he just joined like shortly after or something.
Yeah. So like, yeah, I remember no one even knew who they were.
Yeah.
And they just came there, or they came there as like key stars. I remember, and they did pretty good. They showed like their Kaboom. Was it key stars? I think it was key stars. They started doing like new strats that no one has seen before, and then everyone started kind of like copying their style, and then they started like changing the meta and on a lot of maps, especially Mirage. They were really good at Mirage. I remember that was like their go-to map at the time. So they kind of defined a part of the meta back then, and that's like really big for an NA team or Brazilian team, at that time.
Right. Obviously, after this, if people don't remember, there was the whole thing where, like, because of his personality, a lot of drama surround s1mple just generally. So even though you've just had this result of the major, like, remember the story, guys, before the major, he could have been kicked for all the problems in scrims. You do the semis and almost win the major. Obviously, if you play cards right, it's going to be great. It should be in this lineup for years. Then what happened afterwards there was that Dreamhack Malmo tournament, like 1 week later. You flew there. It was the one where you brought Coaster in. It didn't go well, like you had those losses. And then I heard that, like, even at that tournament was where he already was like, actually, I just want to, like, go home to Ukraine or something. Which is like, what? And then basically, almost immediately, he was out of the team. And then you had the lineup with Coaster. And then people know by the time the next major came, just before that, as a stand-in, he came back in. And people don't know, people forget that. He was a stand-in at that major. He wasn't even supposed to be in the team then. Like, this sounds like some crazy back and forwards, like the whiplash of what's going on and are we a team and what's our lineup? It sounds like a messy period.
Yeah, I remember that Malmo tournament. I was having like the game of my life against Tyloo. I literally had like 40 kills or something. And it started with like a really good clip on CT Pistol. I had like a 4K, like all one taps. I was like, oh my God, like, let's go. Like, I'm feeling this game a lot. And being on a team with s1mple, it's like, I need to outfry this guy, Like, if I want to have like a really good game, like, I gotta play really hard. And like, I remember he was not having the best game. Like, he was getting killed, like holding angles with his op and stuff. So he's getting like frustrated. And I have like 30 something kills, and he just goes, I just want to go home. I was like,
just in the game, right?
Please. Yeah, in the middle of the game. I was like, no way this is happening, man. No way. And then we just wound up losing that game, and it was just a very weird environment after that.
Right, like I say, he came in as the stand-in, and then you had like that ECS tournament, which was fair enough. You're not expected to do well like the second he comes in the team. But when you came to the actual major, people forget this, is actually in your group you had Virtus Pro and Envious. Like, you weren't even supposed to get out of this group. What were your actual expectations? Like, had the like boot camp gone well? Did you actually think you had a chance to do well at this major?
Yeah, we had a super good boot camp actually. I remember we had JDM, and just previously before that, we were doing like really good in scrims. We felt super confident. The environment was actually surprisingly really good. I think we kind of had a good balance of just personalities in that team, and it felt like super productive. So we actually did have pretty high expectations that tournament because of just how like the scrims were going and how well we were meshing together. And obviously having a previous experience with Sasha on the team helped a lot. And we had 2 very strong oppers at that time. We had JDM and s1mple. So we had like really good double op setups, and I knew that was going to be a huge factor going into the tournament. But I don't really necessarily remember like thinking like we're going to lose any game going into it. I remember feeling really confident going into that tournament because of that boot camp.
Right. Obviously, the two big matches were against Na'Vi, FNATIC, and then at the end you played SK. People don't know that's like the top 3 teams in the world. Like, you actually had the bracket of death. I remember everyone even said Na'Vi's going to beat you. That was like a close game. Then obviously the FNATIC one. Like, look, the FNATIC one wasn't even supposed to be a chance. That's supposed to be like easy 2-0. It's FNATIC do. They don't lose semis and majors, right? Obviously people might know, not just because he did the 1v2, but like these matches are basically what created the legend of s1mple. Like when he did these results, like spoiler, I can tell you behind the scenes, like that's the moment Na'Vi actually thought, like, maybe we should just recruit this guy to our team, like, obviously. And then also, like, that's the reason Liquid went to the final. Because I always think people are too harsh. Like, because the final was shit, you guys played really bad, and SK was, like, unbeatable at the time. If you just watch the final, you're going to be like, this Liquid team's crap. And it's like, yeah, but it's like you weren't even supposed to be in the final. Like, it's outrageous that you won these other 2 matches. It must have been epic, the back and forth, and beating all these. Like, you're beating, like, Guardian and fucking Olaf and Flushing. These are the players that always go deep in the major. You're not supposed to win against them as an NA team.
Yeah, I think that tournament was the tournament where we actually probably developed our biggest fan base.
Right.
Once we beat those teams, I remember like the whole stadium was full of just Liquid jerseys, and it was such a surreal feeling because I feel like we like turned the crowd into our favor after we beat all the European teams, and it was actually really cool because usually like they like don't like the teams that knocked out their favorite teams.
Yes.
But they actually like turned for us, and it was such a amazing feeling. It was probably like top 3 best feelings in my career, just in terms of like atmosphere, especially at like such a prestigious tournament. And yeah, I mean, yeah, obviously we weren't supposed to beat those teams. We had really good, I think all of it was just based on this really good boot camp that we had, and then we started building up so much confidence going forward that we're just like, we just prepped the same way every day, and we didn't really care who we played. It was the same exact prep, and then opponent, like just every day. It was a really consistent format we had. And I remember because like all these teams had a super deep map pool, like the FNATIC and all these teams, and Na'Vi had a really good map pool, for example. We would actually split up the prep. So like me and John would do like 2 maps, and then like Peacemaker, s1mple would do like a map or 2, or not s1mple. s1mple wasn't doing any prep, but like other people were doing prep. We would just kind of come together in the little locker room and just talk about like there was a lot of trust within the team if we're like delegating like prep to certain people, you know. And I think that was kind of part of what helped me develop my leadership traits, was that tournament, just like doing the prep, because I genuinely enjoyed it. I was like, I actually enjoy this. I feel like, yeah, it's nice to like, it's nice that people trust me to do like such an important prep for such a big for such an important match, you know. So that was really cool. That was a cool feeling.
Right, what is the change? Because obviously, like, it's not like aside from having s1mple was super cracked. Aside from that, the rest of the players are all players who have like had the same skill the year earlier when they go into these lands, and it's like whatever results. What's the difference when you have results like this, where like at these 2 majors, essentially the vibe has to be like, wait a minute, we could have just won these 2 majors. Like, could we actually like be the best team in the world? Like, that's got to be a thought you've had. What's the difference between being like a team with the same skill but like inexperienced, and then having like these real results that sort of give you the confidence?
Well, at that time it was like new. It was a new feeling for sure. Like compared to like the Liquid lineup where we actually did it, it was like it was just like a moment in my life where I was like we're close. You know, it feels like we're really close to becoming like, because that's everyone's goal, is to become the best team in the world. Obviously, like for Counter-Strike teams, some are far-fetched and some are like, you know, possible but maybe not possible. And that for that lineup, it was like we could do this. We have the talent. It's just more like, do we have the emotional ability to stay together and just work on our problems and find solutions for all of our issues that we have like in the game? Because actually, like in the game, we didn't really have too many problems.
Right.
It was mainly just out of game stuff. It would be like a small problem happens and it would become something like way bigger than it should have been. It's like, that was like basically the biggest problem that we had with that lineup, I would say.
Right, obviously, look, he's the GOAT now. He's won a major, Grand Slam, all that. He's got all the stuff. It's okay. And also now, not loads, but he's chilled out a bit. He has chilled out a bit. That's true. I can confirm as much. So here's the question, right? You can choose which one. Just give me like a funny, s1mple story. Either where he like said something funny in practice, or he got mad at something, or he BM'd someone. Is there a good s1mple story?
A good s1mple story?
Like, did he ever tell you anything? Did he ever tell you anything outrageous, like you're a dog or something because he did badly in the game or something?
I mean, he actually didn't really ever say anything to me for some reason. Like, I don't know. I don't really like create problems within my team. I like to figure out solutions ASAP. And I just have that kind of like laid back personality. So I'll never forget this one story that him and Eric we're in a Mirage scrim, and like I think Eric called the strat and s1mple like just went and died somewhere, and then s1mple was like, he just basically said like, I don't want to play with a player like this or something, and I was like, what the hell? Like, what is happening right now? And then Eric, I don't know, it was just like a back and forth, but I'll never forget when he said that, and I was like, damn, like this is bad.
It's a hell of a line
like we're getting paid and all this, so
exactly, yeah.
Yeah. So we had to get like the CEO involved to like figure out like a solution, and ultimately just wound up getting Eric benched.
Yes.
Something like that, if I remember correctly.
Because the reason I ask that is because otherwise it won't make that much sense when people see the results when I tell this story. Even though, yes, eventually, I mean, it was almost inevitable when he had those results at Cologne. He was going to end up on Na'Vi eventually. It just makes sense, doesn't it? But there was a window, and I can confirm, there was really a window where he could have stayed on Team Liquid. And if you don't know, you said it perfectly earlier when you mentioned that at the San Jose the year earlier, because Steve Arnsett's coming from League of Legends, where remember, like, you have no chance to win Worlds there. It's like all the fucking Koreans are unbelievable. So in CSGO, when he has a team that like actually has a chance, like, wait a minute, we're in the final of the major. I heard basically it was more like, right, do you guys want him? And if you want him, then maybe we make some like crazy offer. Maybe we give him like a massive contract or something. And the story goes that there was like an internal vote, and unfortunately, which is to imply how bad he must have been in practices. Even though you've just seen him like it might be the best player in the world, the vote came back no. Like we're going to say no, we're going to pass essentially, right? And it sounds mad now to say you passed on the GOAT, but it made sense, right? What can you remember any of that? Can you remember what the logic was? What was your like? Were you involved? Were you one of the people who had to say no?
I remember the exact like location when we had this conversation, but we had like already had Pimp lined up for that spot, so it was kind of awkward. But we kind of like voted, and we're like, well, we already had Pimp. Pimp was like pretty good at the time, like because he fit this role kind of. He's like secondary opper, he likes to op, so yeah, it fits that role. Obviously he's probably not as talented as s1mple is, but does he have a good like personality? So basically, like we did like a pros and cons for each player, and we saw that like the four of us were really strong together. s1mple is obviously playing super well with us, and we figured that we can create like a structure within our team where we're just all five good, and we can all five just like work really well together and become like one of the best teams in the world. But obviously having like s1mple on your team is such a big factor when you're playing against your opponents. Like you just always have to worry about him, and we knew that we had that kind of X factor in our team. So ultimately we decided to go with Pimp, and then it's actually funny because at the Cologne major, while like we were all doing prep at night, like I told you earlier, s1mple was actually hanging out with Na'Vi, and he would come back, and we're playing. Yeah, so I mean it's kind of inevitable, right? But we were hanging out, or he was hanging out with Na'Vi, and I remember he's like, he came to us like the next day, and he's like, because we were playing Na'Vi the next day, and he was like, guys, I know the veto. And we're like, oh no, he probably told them what map we're gonna play and all this stuff. He's like, and he was actually right. I think it was like Nuke or something. I was like, God, this is.
If people don't know, that sounds worse than it is, because the thing about him back then was it's just he had no filter. He would just say whatever he was thinking. He wasn't saying that to like play mind game. He would just say whatever he was thinking, right? Yeah,
exactly. So like, we were all like, because obviously he wanted to join Na'Vi because that's like his dream team, right?
Sure.
So we're like, and he's hanging out with them. He's doing really good at this tournament. He's probably telling them like, oh yeah, I'm carrying these guys, and they're like, yeah, you are. You know, it's just like a bunch of back and forth. So it's kind of inevitable that he wanted to join Na'Vi. And I mean, he was like outspoken about it. That's like his dream team that he wanted to join. So we were like concerned that he was like telling them our vetoes and all this stuff. I remember at that time. It's pretty funny to think about now, but yeah.
Right. I will just say, by the way, it's just if you're watching, there you go, Pimp. It's on the record. Technically, they chose Pimp over s1mple. Now, forget the rest of what happened after that. We don't need to get into that. That's all good. That one moment, Pimp, you had that one, mate. You get the win on that one. That's the W. Now, I will say what you've just said there, actually, the vision was, which, look, at the time sounds utterly ridiculous. I remember even hearing this from Hiko, like, what the fuck? Was like, we essentially don't need s1mple, right, after that major. And like you say, we can just all be good. Like, we can figure it out. But I've always said this, is in some ways, that was when I really actually noticed EliGE. Because after this tournament, dude, he actually became like fucking, like, he was already good, but he did, like, go to another, like, he did become, like, a star player in the team, right? Obviously, later, you played with him for many, many, many years. People know now he's, like, got a fucking insane resume, HLTV top 20 loads of times, etc. Right? Obviously, he was someone who had the talent like before, but what was EliGE like as a star player? Like, who was he when he actually like took over and wasn't just like another player in the team?
I think actually like having s1mple on the team kind of humbled John a little bit, because like John, obviously like his attitude wasn't the best back then. He didn't like if he didn't really get like a spot that he wanted, then he would kind of like throw like a tantrum in a way. So like having s1mple on the team really helped, I feel like, develop him as a person, because like s1mple was like super toxic. Sure. And then it kind of humbled John. So John's like, I can't be like John like hated. It's kind of like mom and dad are fighting kind of scenario, you know. It's like we don't like that argument part of the team, and it was happening a lot. So I feel like John at the time had like a good attitude while Sasha was on the team. So I think that really during that period is when John really started working on himself emotionally, and ever since that point he started like getting better and better and better and better. Like he's really self-aware as a player in person on what he does and what he cause and effect kind of thing for other players and teammates. So obviously some players like they can't control their tilt, and they just like, I know exactly from my experience, like when I'm tilted I play worse and I play more like scared, whereas like some players when they get tilted they want to like go more aggressive and like try to make plays and get like their like KD back, for example, or whatever maybe that like satisfies them. So I think during that period I feel like it just really helped him kind of find that way to like work on himself as a player. And then also like it just made him a better person as well, because he started becoming more outspoken and more outgoing, and he's just been like getting better ever since, I would say, since that period.
And after this, you had the ESL New York event. And look, even though, yes, s1mple and Navi did win the event, like fair play, you still getting again top 4 and you were winning a map against them, etc. Like, do you think that actually did like validate, like, actually we can do it without someone, we can be, it's not, we weren't just carried by this one guy, we're really good too.
Yeah, I definitely thought that we still had a lot of talent on our team, and we still had that confidence still going. And it was kind of like, you know, like the honeymoon phase. Like we were like in a permanent honeymoon phase because we had to stand in so much.
Okay.
And I feel like once we got Pimp, we started becoming a team more and less reliant on people making plays within like the structure. So because we didn't have as much talent as we had when we had Sasha on the team. So like other players had to step up, like you said, like John had to step up to become the star player. I had to step up with more like tactical stuff. Pimp helped a lot with that too. So I just think dropping s1mple really elevated everyone else as a player in terms of their respective roles.
Right, before we get into the next era of the team, I do have one question which goes like this. If people don't know, one of the weirdest things about the fact that later Astralis and Team Liquid were the main rivals for all those years and you were always playing against them and Device, is if people don't know, even all the old versions of Team Liquid used to always not only lose to Astralis, but Device used to just go fucking bonkers. You were like his favourite team to play against. It felt like he would always just be farming and getting crazy, like 30 bombs and shit. Like, do you remember this era?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's always been like an insane player. I feel like because we had kind of a lack of a main opper that, you know, just only worked on their op and positioning and stuff, he kind of just felt very confident going against like rifles. And I think that's just, it's pretty easy to understand why he was as good as he was versus my team.
Yes. I've been pleasantly surprised during the time I've had my Patreon and my Patreon community, the Illuminati, by both the financial support they've provided and the moral support. And so this video was kindly supported and made possible by Starlust, Theo Buenzelli, Ahmed Haju, Matt Pugnaccio Racula, Toucan, Jensen Go, Animosity, Tobias Bernasconi, Bot Pounder 420, Yurka 86, Tosh, and as always, you know it, a special thanks goes out to my main man, Jerky's Minion. Would you like to ask a question in one of those AMAs where I tend to go pretty in depth? Sometimes they even spin out into their own videos. Do you want teasers to find out who the upcoming guests are for the myriad of interviews that I do across esports? Maybe you want to suggest a topic or a guest? We have a channel on my Discord where you can do that if you're at the right tier. And of course, you could potentially take part in one of those lengthy esports discussions with me about whatever is on your mind in the scene. Well, if any of those perks sound tantalizing, put your money where your mouth is and join the Illuminati today via the Patreon link in the description box below.